Hello everyone, Metanot here. The goal of the following weapon tier list is to help you choose a weapon best suited for the strategy I outlined in my previous video, which you can find down in the description. This tier list also only focuses on liberating the Terminate faction, so keep an eye out for the Automatons faction version. Alright, primary weapons. Like I said before, all weapons have a place, and although yes, some perform better at the same thing than others, after testing each weapon intensely, I've found that every weapon makes you change how you play to really get the best out of it. And ultimately, you can succeed with almost any weapon. Also, why are people trashing on the base Liberator so much? I took it out on a solo Helldive run for ships and giggles and found that it's actually very solid. It has a nice capacity of 45 light armor penetrating rounds in each mag, with 7 mags in total, at a solid damage per bullet of 55. It's very stable with its recoil of 15 and a solid fire rate of 640. It has a flashlight, 3 fire modes, and 3 magnification ranges. Now, another stat that I wish was displayed on each weapon is handling, or ergonomics in some games, which I will add to this weapon tier list. The qualifiers I'll use are super heavy, heavy, medium, light, and super light. The AR-23 Liberator assault rifle in this case has a comfortable light handling profile. Now, I can just talk about gun stats all day and give it a random rank and end the video, but we don't do that here. Let's try to actually go deeper than just the meta. I will be ranking these weapons based on how well they perform within a tactical stealth playstyle, with a focus on 3 critical aspects. Point of interest clearing, meaning how quickly and effectively you can clear an objective. Horde disengagement, meaning the ability to disengage and escape from active hordes of enemies. And emergency horde clear, meaning how effectively you can get enemies off of you once they swarm you. Now, for POI clearing, even though this weapon's stats are good, it's a necessity to quickly liberate enemies, but its DPS can sometimes make the gun unreliable, especially when there are beefier enemies guarding the place. So I'll give it a B in this category. Horde disengagement. Its light weapon handling and recoil make it so you can quickly liberate enemies chasing you down from short to long ranges with ease. A tier. And finally, emergency horde clear. Sometimes things just spawn next to you, and as you run, you come across a scouting party and are now overrun with enemies. So the only option you have is to get them off of you so you may escape. And with this gun, its mag capacity and DPS make it easy to deal with a small group of hunters at once. I also suggest doing this in first person though, as in third person the weapon seems to be much more inaccurate. B tier. All in all, the AR-23 Liberator rifle can oftentimes be a reliable weapon when you need it the most, so it deserves a spot in the B tier. Alright, next on the war bond is the SG-8 Punisher. It is a manually loading pump action shotgun that has no in-battle modifications. It has a max ammo of 56 with a mag capacity of 16, with each shot dealing a wallop of 360 damage from short to medium range, but at the cost of high recoil that makes it semi-difficult to keep on target during continuous fire, even for its slow firing rate of 80. And lastly, it has a light handling profile allowing for fast target acquisition. Now, when point of interest clearing, it is somewhat good as it does do a substantial amount of damage, but due to its pellet spread, it suffers from damage drop-off at longer distances, requiring you to get too close to be effective. Also, its slow rate of fire really messes with your DPS. But if the situation is right, like there being only a small group of enemies, and you get close enough to one-shot them, then it is possible to clear out a POI. C tier. Next is horde disengagement. There seems to be either a bug or a weird RNG damage value for this gun. It can sometimes one-shot, and other times it shoots marshmallows at things, even if all pellets hit. This can make it very inconsistent when dealing with anything coming at you. If you're dealing with stalkers, I found that shooting them in the legs can make them flee from you, although I still need more testing to prove this. Anyway, C tier. And finally, emergency horde clear. Due to its lack of fire rate, anything more than 4 hunters on you means reinforcing. At most, you'll be able to liberate 2, while the other 2 finish the job. Even dealing with larger enemies where in theory all pellets should land, its seemingly RNG damage can make it a very unreliable weapon to defend yourself with. This makes it very sad as in most games I love using pump action shotguns. D tier. Overall, the SG Punisher is C tier. Alright, next on the war bond is the R-63 Diligence. It's a marksman rifle that has only 1 fire mode and offers 3 different magnification ranges. It has a decent max ammo of 181 with a mediocre magazine size of 20 its damage of 112 per bullet is in a very weird spot, as combined with its fire rate gives you decent DPS on paper, but not so good in practice. Also, I feel like all the marksman rifles should have medium armor penetration, which they don't, but that's just me. It has a weirdly low recoil for a marksman rifle at 35, but I guess with its average damage per bullet value, it makes sense. Its fire rate of 350 makes sense for a marksman rifle, I just wish it hit a little harder. And finally, I would consider it to have a medium handling profile. When POI clearing, it is average at best. Its medium-sized magazine and weird damage value that sometimes doesn't even one-shot the smallest critters. It also doesn't do well versus beefier enemies, but its medium handling profile and manageable recoil does, however, help you clear out small groups of campers from a very safe distance. So it's not the worst, B tier. For horde disengagement, it is in an awkward spot. Its medium profile and decent damage does let you quickly liberate any hunters or lights groups of enemies approaching you. But again, its low ammo capacity per mag makes it so you have to be super precise, and you almost feel like you're wasting bullets shooting small enemies, but you also can't shoot armor enemies, so you're kind of stuck between two bad options. C tier. Finally, emergency horde clear. Usually when the enemy is on top of you, you tend to miss your shots in a panic. Something this weapon doesn't like due to its limited mag size. You may be able to escape, but due to its slowish rate of fire, it's gonna be an uphill battle all the way. C tier. All in all, the R-63 Diligence fits nicely in C tier. Alright, next up is the SMG-37 Defender. A submachine gun that offers 3 different firing modes and a flashlight, with an excellent max ammo of 361 and a beautiful magazine capacity of 45. It shoots very powerful rounds, dealing 70 damage per bullet with a recoil of 10, being the lowest of all projectile-based weapons. Its fire rate is comfortable at 520 and has a super light handling profile. When POI clearing, due to its large mag capacity, high damage per bullet, low recoil, and super light profile, make it a democracy-bringing weapon. It clears outposts in an instant, it has no damage inconsistencies, and an incredibly accurate target acquisition. With this, you may clear any outpost without issue. S tier. Now, for horde disengagement, it is an excellent weapon. You can quickly dispatch anything from short to medium long ranges almost immediately. Like I said before, its damage, handling, and recoil give you amazing survivability and effectiveness at serving liberty. Oh, and one more thing. Since it's a one-handed weapon, you can use it while carrying mission items and/or the ballistic shield if you really want to. Also, you can run and shoot behind you, which makes it that much more awesome. S tier. And finally, emergency horde clear. What can I say? Its damage per bullet, mag capacity, recoil, and super light profile make it so even medium-large groups of enemies on you are no problem. You can just hold the trigger down and most things will be liberated. Although, trigger discipline is encouraged always. If I really want to find a flaw, it would be that it cannot pen medium armor, which in some cases is necessary, but other than that, that will be all. A tier. And like that, the SMG-37 Defender is S tier in my book. Alright, next up is the SG-225 Breaker, a fast-firing loaded semi-auto shotgun with 2 different firing modes and a flashlight. Decent max ammo capacity of 129. With a magazine size of 16. It destroys with its 330 damage per bullet or shell. And with the help of its low recoil of 30 and fire rate of 300, it can dish out crazy amounts of freedom. It also has a light handling profile, which makes it great for target acquisition. Okay, this one's gonna be a little controversial, and I like to remind everyone that this is just my opinion, and it's also based on the results of my research. Also, all guns were tested only within the Helldive difficulty. When POI clearing, the Breaker is a top tier contender for the best POI clearing weapon. With its great damage, fire rate, and low recoil and light profile make it so most if not all enemies melt from short to medium ranges. You can even liberate enemies midway through their mating call without effort. Now, while this weapon is crazy good, it does suffer from the RNG damage bug or phenomena that most shotguns suffer from. While reliable, it can sometimes shoot teabags at even the smallest enemies, leaving you puzzled. Also, another thing to mention is although this weapon has a tighter shell spread than other shotguns, it still suffers from the damage fall off at longer ranges, wasting more ammo and needing to get closer to the enemies to get the most out of it. Something this playstyle doesn't really like. The further away you are from the enemies, the better. A tier. For horde disengagement, it is a beast. With its 16 shells per mag and damage, you can quickly break from a breach as you'll mow down most non-heavy enemies with ease. Remember, never waste your ammo on armored enemies. The only downside here is its damage spread drop off at medium ranges, and since most of the time it's crucial to have range to be able to properly disengage, the breaker gets an A tier in this category. Finally, emergency horde clear. When overrun, break away from the mob quickly with the SG-225 breaker. But for real though, this weapon shines at close ranges as its DPS is crazy good. While it cannot penetrate medium armor, it removes any lights pecking at you. Another thing to note about this weapon is that while it feels really good to shoot, always have trigger discipline as you will find yourself running out of ammo very quickly, faster than most guns if you're not careful. S tier. So all in all, the SG-225 breaker is A tier. Also, before you report me to the Ministry of Truth, remember that this tier list is strictly for the stealth playstyle highlighted in my previous video. Link down in the description. Alright, next on the warband is the LAS-5 Scythe, an energy-based laser rifle that has no weapon modifiers other than a flashlight, with a mag or heatsink capacity of 7 and 8 seconds of continuous fire per heatsink. It has a decent damage of 300 per second with a recoil of 1, meaning it has essentially no recoil, and a medium handling profile for quick target acquisition. When POI clearing, it does a decent job. Its short to medium long range capabilities does help you clear out POIs from a safe distance, and its handling makes it so you can quickly cycle between enemies. And this is great and all until there are more than a few beefy enemies, as even though it technically has infinite ammo, with 300 damage per second, it doesn't do well at quickly liberating enemies. It's more of a support weapon meant for prolonged battles. B tier. For horde disengagement, it can be good at taking out enemies, as long as it's a very small group of them. This is because its low DPS and walking speed reduction when shooting can cause them to quickly catch up to you and also leave you vulnerable to getting flanked by other enemies. And since this style of gameplay is all about speed and evasion, this won't do. C tier. And finally, emergency horde clear. Its low DPS can make it extremely difficult to get out of a bad situation, as sometimes even if you panic flail and your gun happens to hit a few enemies, it might not be enough to liberate them. In short, it becomes unreliable during an emergency situation, and due to its slow walking speed when shooting, it can make bad situations worse. C tier. All in all, the LAS-5 Scythe is C tier. Alright, next on the blog is the AR-23 Liberator Penetrator, an assault rifle that allows 2 firing modes and 3 magnification modes. It has a moderate amount of max ammo of 331 with a decent magazine capacity of 30. Its medium armor penetrating damage of 45 and fire rate of 640 give it a versatile but lower DPS value than average. It has a comfortable recoil of 19 and a medium handling profile. When clearing out POIs, this rifle's longer range allows for engagements at safer distances. Its mediocre damage, low recoil, and decent handling also allow it to liberate a medium-sized amount of enemies very quickly. Now, even though this weapon can penetrate medium armor, its lower damage make it so there really is no point in trying to liberate more armored enemies. And this is because even though you'll eventually succeed in liberating said enemy, you would have wasted too much ammo and time doing so. B tier. For horde disengagement, it can in most cases be a very reliable weapon. It is great at medium to long ranges, but suffers at close ranges. So as long as you can quickly remove the fast moving enemies from far away, which this gun is decent at, you should be fine. And if you find yourself defending a POI like let's say an extract, its versatility allows you to engage all sorts of enemies if you like, making you very valuable as a team member. A tier. And finally, emergency horde clear. Due to this gun having medium armor penetration, it in a bind allows you the versatility to be able to damage light and medium enemies alike. Which is nice, but I wish it had a little more damage for it to matter. Also, like stated before, this weapon excels at medium to long ranges, but at close ranges it's decent at best. Meaning that in a bind, its 30 round magazine can help you break away from a small group of light enemies, but anything more and you might be in trouble. B tier. Overall, the AR-23 Liberator Penetrator gets a B. Next on the list is the R-63 CS Diligence Counter Sniper. It is a marksman rifle that has only a semi-auto firing mode, 3 magnification modes, and no flashlight. It has a max ammo of 106 with a semi-small mag capacity of 15. Its light armor penetration damage of 128 and fire rate of 350 give it a moderate amount of DPS per mag. And lastly, its recoil of 53 and heavy handling profile can make it unwieldy at times. It makes me wish it did a little more damage per bullet. When point of interest clearing, due to its heavy handling profile, low magazine capacity, and mediocre damage, it struggles to clear everything but the smallest groups of enemies. If its damage was higher, it would be an actually viable weapon though. It does, however, benefit from the range as a marksman rifle, letting you liberate enemies from a safe distance. B tier. For horde disengagement, surprisingly this weapon is not as bad for this. Its low damage on paper for some reason hits harder than you think. It even lets you bully any stalker lurking in the distance. And most hunters you target will usually fall with one well-placed shot. If you are experienced with horde management, you can somewhat efficiently break off from a horde, especially at longer ranges. C tier. Let me know in the comments if you'd like to see a video on horde management. And finally, emergency horde clear. Due to its slowish fire rate and magazine capacity, it can be difficult to escape from an ambush of more than 3 to 4 hunters. Its heavy weapon handling also makes it harder to quickly place your shots, wasting even more of your limited ammo. C tier. Overall, the R-63 Diligence counter sniper is C tier. Next up, SG-8S Slugger, a manually loading pump action shotgun with no field modifications, a max ammo of 56 with a capacity of 16 shells at once. Each shell deals 280 damage and is in fact a medium armor penetrating slug that allows you to shoot from short to medium long ranges. Its recoil per shot is 110 and visual shake is quite high, so even with its low firing rate of 80, it can sometimes be hard to place continuous shots on the same target at longer ranges. And lastly, it has a light handling profile that lets you quickly cycle between enemies. When clearing POIs, with its high damage, medium armor penetration, light handling speed, and good magazine capacity, it helps you to quickly one-shot or incapacitate enemies, making this weapon a good candidate for clearing enemies camping a POI, with the benefit of being able to do so at much longer ranges without suffering from the damage spread reduction that most shotguns suffer from. The only thing I would say is that its rate of fire does hinder its ability to clear larger groups of enemies before they can cause a breach. B tier. For horde disengagement, it can be an excellent weapon. Its 16 shells can go through and one-shot multiple enemies at once at short to medium long ranges, helping you quickly break off from most hordes. There really aren't many negatives with this weapon other than its max ammo. Don't get me wrong, its damage is awesome, and with some skill you can line up nice one-shot multi-liberations, helping your ammo economy. However, that probably won't be enough to keep you from switching to your secondary decently often. B tier. And finally, emergency horde clear. Having the DPS to quickly dispatch enemies on top of you is a must in this category, and sadly this weapon suffers from the same lack of survivability as other weapons with a slow firing rate. This weapon, however, comes with the benefit of medium armor pen. This gives you the versatility not only to clear small enemies but also stagger and potentially liberate bigger armored enemies immediately within your vicinity. C tier. Overall, the SG-8S Slugger is B tier. Next up, the SG-225SP Spray&Pray, a fast-firing loaded semi-auto shotgun with 2 firing modes and a flashlight, with an impressive max ammo of 289 and a mag capacity of 32, a very manageable recoil of 45, an awesome fire rate of 300, but weirdly, a heavy handling profile. Now, this weapon is amazing and deserves an S tier grade, is something you would hear from a very undemocratic propaganda. Like, look, it says its damage is 144, but that doesn't even matter if you can't penetrate even light armor.
T-minus 10 seconds, clear landing zone. Pelican 1 arriving at coordinates. Pelican 1 landing in progress.
Like, I know it says shoot smaller pellets, and you would think that that's already reflected in the lower damage versus other shotguns, but no, it's even worse than that. I think that this weapon is currently just bugged, and if it isn't, I wholeheartedly believe that it should be reworked, buffed, or removed from the game. But let's give it a rating, just to be thorough. When POI clearing, its mag capacity, fire rate, and recoil make it a decent weapon when clearing unarmored enemies. Its lack of meaningful damage though, especially at longer ranges, makes you tickle enemies to submission. It's a weapon that it's all bark and no bite. Even versus the only enemy type it should be good versus, which is unarmored. D tier. For horde disengagement, surprisingly this weapon is decent at breaking off from a horde, since the main enemy types that have chasing power are usually unarmored ones. This weapon makes semi-quick work of them, and with its large magazine capable of showering them with gummy bears, it might be enough to stop a medium-sized horde of unarmored enemies. But again, with this playstyle, the longer you have to slow down to shoot, the worse it is for you. And since you have to sometimes shoot a small enemies up to 5 times, it's basically non-workable. D tier. And finally we got emergency horde clear. If you at any point find yourself surrounded by enemies, this weapon might come in handy in very specific situations, since its magazine capacity does let you shoot non-stop. And while you won't necessarily liberate your enemies, you might be able to slightly stagger them long enough to be able to escape. But that's only if you're able to overcome its heavy handling profile. D tier. The SG-225SP Breaker Spray&Pray is D tier. Alright, next is the PLAS-1 Scorcher. An energy type plasma rifle with only a flashlight as a field modifier. It has a small max amount of ammo of 106 and a mediocre mag capacity of 15. It deals a medium armor penetrating explosive damage of 100 that makes me question if it's just displaying a wrong number or I don't know what it is, because in practice, this thing hits like a truck. Its recoil of 20 is also null due to its fire rate of 250. And finally, a medium handling profile. When clearing POIs, this weapon is just crazy in the damage department. It can liberate light and medium armored targets with ease at short to medium long ranges. Also, its slow recoil and medium handling profile let you quickly cycle through targets. The only drawback I see is its mag capacity of 15. Pretty quickly, you may find yourself reloading midway through your initial ambush if you happen to miss your shots or don't target weak spots correctly. But other than that, A tier. For horde disengagement, due to its explosive medium armor penetrating damage, lower recoil, and medium handling profile, it's a very versatile and reliable weapon. You can easily break from any breach and even help your teammates deal with the more armored targets. It has short to mid-long range capabilities that let you dictate any encounter you come across and make you feel very powerful. This bliss, however, can be short-lived due to its very limited max ammo, so make sure every shot counts. A tier. And finally, emergency horde clear. Due to its versatile damage types, high damage, low recoil, and medium handling profile, you can quickly get yourself out of most tense situations. However, due to its slowish firing rate, you have to make sure to know how to prioritize targets to be effective. A tier. And thus, the PLA-1 Scorcher is A tier. Alright, let's head over to the Steel Veterans Premium Warband. The AR-23E Liberator Explosive. It's an assault rifle that allows 2 firing modes and a flashlight. It has a generous amount of max ammo of 331 with a decent mag capacity of 30. It shoots light penetrating explosive rounds that deal 55 damage. Combined with the slow recoil of 28 and slow fire rate of 320, you'll have no problem using full auto. Lastly, it has a light handling profile. When POI clearing, due to its explosive damage, it lets you stagger and incapacitate enemy limbs. But due to its low fire rate and damage, it struggles to liberate even the smallest groups of enemies at an effective rate, allowing them to quickly call in a breach. D tier. Alright, for horde disengagement, this one is a rather odd duck. Its ability to stagger hordes of enemies lets you and your teammates break off from hordes more easily, making it more of a support weapon for team play. But when it comes to actually liberating enemies, this ain't it. To better explain, it's more of a support weapon for stalling rather than eliminating enemies. C tier. And finally, emergency horde clear. Like I said earlier, this one is an odd duck. While it does let you break off from a gank more easily due to its stagger potential, you can quickly get overrun again due to having to slow down to be able to shoot, basically removing the stagger advantage you had originally. D tier. And with all this, the AR-23E Liberator Explosive is D tier. Next up, the SG-225 Breaker Incendiary. A fast-fire magazine-loaded semi-auto shotgun with 2 different firing modes, and a flashlight. It has a nice ammo capacity of 176 with a magazine size of 25. It has a respectable damage of 180 per shell, plus a weak 3-second fire damage over time effect that introduces clutter when ADSing. But with its slow recoil of 28 and fire rate of 300, it really helps it spread democracy. It also has a low handling profile which makes it great for target acquisition. Not that you need to have the best accuracy, as this weapon's pellet spread seems to be larger than other shotguns. When POI clearing, It is decent at taking out unsuspecting enemies as long as it's not anything more than a medium-sized group of enemies. Due to its low burst damage and high pellet spread, it's good at lighting large groups of enemies on fire. Sadly, its fire damage isn't even enough to liberate the smallest of enemies in time, and can oftentimes cause a bug breach. B tier. For horde disengagement, it's great when dealing with enemies at close range. Even though its damage is lower than most shotguns, it can still shred most enemies that catch up to you. Also, its large magazine size gives you a lot of staying power and pushback at short to medium ranges. Though, sadly, its damage drops dramatically past these ranges due to its larger pellet spread, and while its ability to set the horizon on fire can make for a beautiful fireworks show, after seeing the enemies walk out of the wall of flame seemingly undamaged, it can really ruin your mood. Don't get me wrong though, this weapon is fun to use and can oftentimes be the right weapon for the job. I just don't think trading 150 damage from the base breaker to add in an ineffective gimmick is really the best trade-off. B tier. Finally, emergency horde clear. Its fire rate, magazine capacity, damage, and pellet spread make it so you can easily escape from a large group of enemies, as all you really need to do is hold down the trigger and watch everything close to you melt instantly. S tier. The SG-225 IE breaker Incendiary is A tier. And yeah, it's a bit worse than the normal breaker. Alright, next on the list is the AR-5 Dominator. Apparently, it's a heavy rifle, whatever that means. I would classify it more as a semi-auto shotgun that shoots explosive slugs. But anyway, it has 2 firing modes and a flashlight. It has a small max ammo pool of 105 with a mag capacity of 15. It obliterates most things with a damage of 200 that feels more like 400. It has a high recoil of 75, but due to its slow fire rate of 250, it's relatively easy to control. But due to its super heavy handling profile, it is very unwieldy to control. When POI clearing, due to its ability to 1 to 3 tap medium enemies, it can generally easily clear a POI at a relatively quick speed, although its super heavy handling profile makes it so only the more experienced Helldivers can effectively use this beast. But its small magazine size does hold it back from being a premium warbond worthy weapon. A tier. For horde disengagement, its explosive damage and manageable recoil does let you liberate enemies from short to medium ranges effectively. And yeah, it can shoot further out, but the muzzle velocity or bullet travel speed is relatively slow. This will have you leading your shots further the longer the distance. Also, due to its super heavy handling profile, it can sometimes make it harder for you to shoot the smaller enemies, especially hunters who can evade your crosshair when they see you pointing at them. This weapon is definitely more suitable for a heavy support role, as its damage and medium armor penetration make you the armor shredder of the group. And lastly, its small max ammo pool does make it a waste or an overkill to use this gun for smaller enemies, although nothing is an overkill when spreading democracy. B tier. And finally, emergency horde clear. Due to its heavy handling profile and low magazine size, it can sometimes be difficult to escape from a horde of enemies pouncing on you. Although this weapon's skill ceiling is very high due to its damage capabilities. If you are experienced enough and you land your shots in a panic, it can actually be a reliable weapon, at least in most scenarios. B tier. So all in all, the AR-5 Dominator is B tier. And finally, a weapon that you can only get if you purchase the Super Citizen Edition, the MP98 Knight. A one-handed submachine gun that offers 3 different firing modes and no flashlight, with an excellent max ammo of 400 and a huge mag capacity of 50. It shoots decently powerful rounds, dealing 50 damage per bullet with a moderate recoil of 20. It has an alarming rate of fire of 1380, which on paper gives it a huge amount of damage output. But that's only if you can land those shots, as a full burst with this gun will have you shooting at your destroyer. So trigger discipline is very necessary with this gun. And lastly, it has a super light handling profile, which is excellent for target acquisition. Point of interest clearing. Due to its decent damage, fire rate, handling, and magazine size, you can almost instantly clear even a large group of enemies. Now, this is only if it's all small enemies, as medium ones can quickly drain your magazine. Also, due to its higher recoil, you do need to get closer to be able to land all those shots. But all in all, I say this one gets an A tier in this category. For horde disengagement, everything about this weapon scream, I am speed. And for this playstyle, it's what we want. Any non-fleshy armored enemies that are in a short to medium range will immediately evaporate. This is one of the very few guns that's let me defend myself versus a horde and stalkers, the bane of my existence, in one magazine. Alright, let's talk about its fire rate that everybody complains about. It's all about trigger discipline. Once you use it enough, you'll soon get the feel for it, and know how much time to press the trigger per enemy. This weapon gives you the ability to dictate any battle, and I love it. S tier. And finally, emergency horde clear. So for this category, this weapon's letter grade really depends on how well you can manage your magazine. If you get a horde on top of you, You really need to prioritize your enemies while also being mindful of your ammo. So for this category, it can either be a B or an S, so I'll give it an A tier. The MP98 Knight is A tier. I wasn't expecting this video to be so long, but anyway, thank you for watching. This was Metanot, and see you in the next one.